All right, so thank you all again for being here this morning or afternoon, wherever you are. And we're going to go ahead and get this webinar started, where we will be talking about DBE and ACDBE experiences with IFR recertification. We did a survey, and we're reviewing some of those results in this presentation. So we will start out with an introduction, then we will give a brief recap of the IFR and read certification processes as DBEs or ACDBEs. Then we'll go into those survey results and talk about some conclusions and recommendations. And then we will have a Q&A period at the end. So our introductions, my name is Dr. Nicole Yates. I will be moderating the Q&A session. I'm a senior consultant and co-owner with Keen Independent Research, and I am here introducing Dave Keen and Mara Rosales, who will be running most of this session and giving you a recap here. So Dave Keen is the founding principal of Keen Independent. He's been a leader in the MBE and DBE program field since 1989. He's successfully defended these programs in court. So Dave has also worked with state DOTs, transit agencies, and airports across the country to help DBEs. And he also, after following the issuing of the IFR, did a pilot program preparing personal narratives for DBEs with AZDOT. And then throughout his career, he has interviewed tens of thousands of representatives from DBEs, including MBEs and WBEs. Mara Rosales is the managing partner of Rosales Law Partners LLP, and she served prior to founding her firm as the general counsel at San Francisco International Airport, where she oversaw legal strategy for major airport infrastructure and transit integration projects. She has also done extensive representation of DBEs and ACDBEs, and she and Dave have worked very closely on a number of projects together. So with that, we can advance to the next slide. I'll tell you a little bit about the comment period here. And how you can participate. There is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen there that you should see, where you can input a question or a comment. So please feel free to do so. Use that function throughout the presentation. We will, at the end, have a period where I will go through and read all of the questions and comments. So a couple of things to note there is that, one, the session is recorded and will be posted to YouTube. So in order to keep all of the questions and comments anonymous, I will remove any identifying details if you provide them in the Q&A. So we won't state anyone's name and we'll remove any identifying details. So again, please feel free throughout the presentation to input your questions or your comments. And with that, I will turn it over to Dave and Mara.
Well, thank you very much. We are going to quickly talk about the Interim Final Rule, which changed the federal DBE program and ACDBE program on October 3rd of 2025. There was a lead up to this related to the change in administration in early 2025, about a year ago, and the Mid-American Milling case, which was filed prior to that. And so we could read the tea leaves that the USDOT and Justice Department were not supporting the previous version of the federal DBE program. They had abandoned defense of the program in the Mid-American Milling case that was in Kentucky, and then we saw a proposed settlement in that case in the beginning in May of 2025, and then we finally see the IFR in October 3rd of 2025. So there was a lead up to it. Much of the IFR is what the USDOT and Department of Justice proposed as the settlement of the Mid-American Milling case. All of that is a lot of detail that you probably don't need to know, because the major change was the IFR on October 3rd. And we'll talk about what that was. There have been some more answers to frequently asked questions that the USDOT has provided. Beyond that, the USDOT has not been in active communications with states or other recipients around the country. It's really been through the IFR that they have changed the program, and they're not out there talking to states or airports or transit agencies about how to implement it, and they're not talking to DBEs. So this is, we're hoping that there's a little bit of public service here to be able to have the voice of the DBEs that everyone can hear. So let me just talk to you briefly about what the IFR did. On October 3rd, the USDOT directed state and local governments around the country to stop setting DBE contract goals. Some states had already stopped contract goals because of the Mid-America Milling injunction, but this was nationwide. So no new DBE contract goals on USDOT funded contracts. Importantly, this does not affect state and local programs. So if it's a city's minority business program or a state's program, this is not affected by the IFR. This is related to the federal DBE program. It required to stop the DBE, counting DBE participation, and they continued the substitution protections for DBEs that were already on current contracts. And this basically stopped certifying any new DBEs or recertifying DBEs until a state certifier had new procedures in place. And the new procedures is no more presumption of disadvantage based on race or gender. So being a minority or a woman-owned firm that's a small business and within the personal net worth limits, that doesn't matter anymore for DBE certification or ACDBE certification. Each firm needs to individually show social and economic disadvantage on an individual basis. It's very similar to how the federal 8A program, the SBA 8A program, changed a couple of years ago, also in the face of litigation, where there is being a minority and a woman-owned firm doesn't matter. Being a firm owned by a socially and economically disadvantaged individual matters. So the IFR directed the certifiers to notify DBEs of these changes, and that's been happening. And then in the language of the IFR, as soon as practicable is the language, the certifiers in each state around the country, and this happens on a state-by-state basis, is to reevaluate the certification of DBEs in their home state. So if you're in California, you get recertified in California. If you're in Arizona, you get recertified in Arizona, and then handle the interstate certification after you are certified in your home state. Each unified certification program, the combination of certifiers in a state, when they are done with the recertification and reevaluation, they need to inform USDOT when they are complete. And then each agency that operates the DBE program, for example, in Oregon, it's COVID that does all the certifications, but it's Oregon Department of Transportation and other local entities that operate the DBE program in the state. They need those individual agencies like or ODOT need to then submit an overall DBE goal, including how they're going to meet that goal in the new DBE program plan. And then you see way off to the right, after they do all that, recertify DBEs, submit a new goal, submit a new program plan, they can go back, if necessary, to having DBE contract goals. So this is a long process. All DBE contract goals stopped on October 3rd. It's a long process, and only if necessary to restart the DBE contract goals. Mara, do you have anything to add here?
Nope. Hello, everybody. No, I don't have anything to add. You've covered it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Okay, so that's the big picture. Let's talk about one of the components of recertification, and I'll introduce this slide and then hand it to Mara Rosales. The personal narrative, and has always been in the federal DBE program that perhaps a white male business owner that has some type of social disadvantage, and we've seen this in the DBE program for decades, on occasion, someone who is not a minority or woman business owner would apply for certification as a DBE. And they would need to individually show that they were socially disadvantaged. Perhaps that's because of a disability, or some other reason. That situation now applies to everybody. So there's no longer presumption of disadvantage. Uh, Instead, you need to, through a personal narrative, and we capitalize it because it's such a big deal. Each DBE or ACDBE, regardless of whether they were successfully certified in the past, now need to show that they have economic hardship, systemic barriers, denied opportunities, based on factors other than race or gender. And there's other components to the personal narrative that you need to show the magnitude of the harm, and basically showing that you, the business owner, throughout in your life have had situations that negatively affected you compared to similarly situated non-disadvantaged persons that might have continuing effects today. That's what we really want to talk about today. We're going to show you the results of a survey that we just did that goes through how DBEs and ACDBEs are navigating this new environment, including how they're trying to put personal narratives together or having difficulties with personal narratives. But we wanted to put on one slide what these requirements are. And then we want to make sure that we have time at the end to answer questions about this, because this is tricky. This has not been done in this way before. And let me hand it to Mara to point out anything that's really maybe the trickiest of any of this that she wants to highlight.
So I would say, and folks who have read the IFR question and answer, or the frequently asked questions, will know and understand, is that you don't have to cover instances in each of these categories. But my recommendation is to clients that you look deeply and as far back in your life experience to see if there were an incident or incidents that you can identify as a disadvantage or a social disadvantage that's not necessarily related to race or gender, but just your life experience. And a lot of folks think, well, what does that really mean with education? It could mean, as an example, with education, that you did not, because of your life experiences, perhaps a passing of a parent, causing your family to be on public assistance, and that limiting your ability to access educational opportunities or institutions that had your household had more income, you would have been able to access. I mean, those kinds of thinking. And then, of course, employment. I think it's easier for folks to focus on their employment experience. But in the business realm, there's a host of incidents that people can point to, covered by the last prong, obtaining financing, et cetera. But really, the takeaway here is I ask clients to think deeply about their experiences in each of these areas and anything else where they feel there has been a disadvantage that puts them on an unlevel playing field vis-a-vis others. And I've been asked the question, well, can I mention race or gender? And I continue to say one's life experience is personal, so one's race and or gender, economic status, all of that is relevant. And while the certifiers cannot rely on the applicant's race or gender to certify an individual as socially disadvantaged or economically disadvantaged, I think it's relevant to the narrative. What I like to tell people is connect the dots between your past experiences to your experiences today, or how those past disadvantaged experiences have flowed through your life and your career and your business experience. That we can talk about specifics with questions, but I think that's kind of the framework to think about this on the personal narrative.
So there's been thousands of DBEs and ACDBEs successfully going through the recertification process around the country. So this is definitely doable. There are definitely applications that are being approved. I want to point out that there are a few states where the certifiers are sending the application back if you mention race or gender, or certainly if you would base the disadvantage solely on race and gender, or in some cases they're taking the extreme position that if you mention race and gender, they will send it back and ask you to revise it. Um, Mara and I have some opinions about this that we're going to keep to ourselves for the moment. But you might imagine that this is not a plan that we would come up with, and we don't read the IFR as requiring rejection of an application if race or gender is mentioned, because all the IFR says is the decision needs to be made on factors and disadvantages other than, say, race or gender discrimination. Um, so we'll leave it at that, but know that you may be in a state where you're facing rejection or at least getting your application sent back to you for revision if you even mention race or gender, and some of them are even saying, well, if you say you're a mother or a daughter, it may be rejected. So know that that's a possibility, and we don't have a time in this webinar for Mara and I to tell you exactly what we think about that. And it doesn't really matter because your state may have rules that they haven't consulted Mara and myself, and they're going to do what they're going to do. So we're going to have time at the end of the webinar to have questions about this and want to be as helpful as possible. Okay, we did a survey of DBEs and ACDBEs around the country. I think many or most or all of the participants in this webinar participated in this survey, and we wanted to give you the results because you took the time to do it. We want you to see how what you were feeling, how you were experiencing the effects of the IFR compared to others. So we got 165 respondents. We thank you for that. And it was all kinds of people, big, small, across the country. We had 37 states, ACDBEs, as well as DBEs. We call it a DBE survey, but it's really a DBE and ACDBE survey as we present these results. Certainly more DBEs than ACDBEs. We had construction firms, professional services firms, other types of firms, and those that are new to business and those who have been maybe certified as a DBE or ACDBE for a long time. And the first question we wanted to give you results of is, what type of assistance did you get from the certifiers or other public agencies in your state? Almost half said no assistance at all, and a third said it was just the written notification of the changes. About a quarter said that there was some additional assistance offered. So there's one state that said they had done hundreds of webinars, workshops, and other assistance. That was an outlier, but good for them. 1% of the DBEs that responded to the survey said that one-on-one assistance was offered in developing the personal narrative. So that is rare. We think that's what's needed. It's very hard to put these personal narratives together, and often external assistance is helpful. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but that has not been, for the most part of the offerings of what the certifiers and other public agencies have done. And then we have another answer to the question is, how do you feel about that? 75% of the respondents were dissatisfied with the amount of assistance that they got, or said that, well, they didn't even know that there was any assistance at all. They were not aware of that. When we've talked to the public entities and certifiers around the country, and Keen Independent probably is, personally talked with about a quarter to a third, and then know what others are doing in addition to that. They have been very hands-off in the recertification process and say basically DBEs and ACDBEs are on their own. We do not think that that is required in the IFR. And in fact, the IFR USDOT language in the IFR anticipates assistance to DBEs through the recertification process. So again, Mara and I are not necessarily supportive of the hands-off approach of the certifiers. There was a missed opportunity, and maybe that can be rectified before all this is complete. DBEs are certainly saying, 3 out of 4 DBEs that we surveyed that had an opinion about this are dissatisfied or just pointed out that I can't rate the assistance because there was none. We want to hear more from you about this at the end of our webinar. So be thinking about what more you have to say, because we're going to show you we have a webinar next week where we have nearly 100 representatives of certifying agencies and other public agencies that are operating the federal DBE program and ACDBE program, where we get to show them the same slides. So if you have something more you would like us to tell them, please put that in the Q&A. When we asked people, why did you say that? We got responses like, I just didn't get the information. No samples were included. There's a whole confusion about, timelines, like when is this due? There was some confusing language in the AFR about not being able to set a deadline, but you can say something close to a deadline. But the step-by-step process, the feedback that we got was not apparent in each state. More information could be provided, lack of communication, So what we found is one of the strongest statements, and we understand because um, uh, in trying to very early on after the IFR, when we were doing the testing of how you would put personal narratives together, where we met with DBEs and put in writing what they were telling us. These were very heartfelt discussions. Going through what you're being asked to describe it can be triggering, it can be upsetting. And we got the comment from one of the DBEs, the whole process has been humiliating. So what you're being asked to do and then the level of support that you may be getting is what we're hearing are really diametrically opposed. So this is an emotional process with no support. We have heard actually from the certifying agencies that their staff have been also distressed by the personal narratives that they've been reading and reading some of the stories. So that's not only affecting the DBEs, but and we're not just saying that this is a process that can be hard and emotional. Those that are even reading the personal narratives are saying the same thing. So they second that among the staff that have responsibility for it.
Mhm.
What type of assistance would be most helpful? So you need to do 2 things in the recertification process. You need to have a personal narrative, which you never had to do before, unless you're a white male-owned firm. And then you need to resubmit the financials, including a personal net worth statement. We ask people what would have been helpful. Very few said help preparing my personal net worth statement. Most of that's been done before. You just need to update it. Although it's not easy, it's something that's not new. Almost half said help preparing my personal narrative, and that's been completely lacking. So we're interested in what advice you have, in addition to what we heard in the survey. We said, some of the comments, verbatim comments out of the survey are help preparing a personal narrative. Samples of narratives would have been helpful, and just clear guidance and procedures. And then changing gears here, we asked DBEs and ACDBEs, what's been the effect on your firm after the October 3rd IFR, which changed the suspended any DBE contract goals or ACDBE contract goals. 15% said, hey, I wouldn't work without the goals. 11% of the DBEs in the survey said no effect because there weren't goals on what I would bid on. And 17% said I wasn't getting the work on the goals projects anyway. 57% said negative effect on contracting. So really the negative answers are the 57% plus the other 17% because, hey, it wasn't working for me anyway. Only 15% said my firm wins work without the goals. And nearly everybody else had a different answer, including the nearly 6 out of 10 firms that said negative effect because I don't get the opportunities that I used to. And here's some of the comments. And some of them are from DBEs that have actually lost work that they had, which may not be the intention of the IFR, but some primes yanked work away from them that they might have had, or certainly not giving them opportunities to compete for work since October 3rd. So big financial impacts, big impacts on staffing. And again, this is the voices of people that probably a lot of them are in the 57% that I've said I've been negatively affected. We've seen this story before. This is, this saying, we've seen this movie before. In 2005, there was a litigation in Washington State that ended up all the states in the western part of the country and all the entities implementing the federal DBE program in the western part of the country had to stop. It was a Western States paving case, and USDOT said, stop your goals until you do a disparity study to comply with this court case. We were doing disparity studies back then where we could actually map what the drop, a precipitous drop in participation of DBEs was after those goals were suspended. So we had that documentation. That's in the record. We've been talking about that for years. And it's not surprising that the same thing is apparently happening again with both, the IFR and in some states, impact from the Mid-America Milling case and the injunction on DBE contract goals in those states. So we want to hear more about this. And what do you do about this? So when you wrap this up, what's the takeaways? We think, and I want to get Mara involved in this slide, recertify, tell your personal narrative, and do it the way your state does, whether it makes sense or not. Seek assistance if you need it, because there's people like us that are available to help. There's people like Mara that are available to help. So that assistance is out there. And because DBEs are negatively affected by how long the recertification is taking, in some states, people are saying, well, this might be the summer or the end of the summer before we get this recertification done. Some states like Oregon, Texas, Illinois, perhaps Michigan, and maybe more are moving more quickly. And states like California are moving more slowly. This is the time is the enemy. The longer it takes to complete the recertification, the longer it takes to, if it's appropriate, go back to DBE contract goals. The worse the effects are for DBEs and ACDBEs around the country, and that's documented well in this survey. Mara, I'm going to let you have the last word here, and then we're going to open it up for questions.
Okay. I would, of course, endorse everything you said, Dave, because it's spot on. Again, my sense of this is my own firm, I should add, is also a certified DBE and in a couple of places, and we've received different instructions. The home state is asking for much more detail, if you will, on times and places and dates of incidents that the interstate certifier hadn't asked. So I find myself essentially rewriting the personal narrative that I prepared for myself. So the point here is, when in doubt, ask. If the instructions are vague, please receive clarity or ask for clarity so that you can follow the instructions from the certifying agency to the letter. And I agree, even though professionally I disagree that you cannot mention race or gender. But if the instructions are not to mention it, then don't mention it. And there's different ways of approaching the experience without it. So that's important. But from a legal lens, whatever experiences you identify, and again, go deep. I did this myself. Go deep in your life experience and in each of these categories and others that you think are relevant, and whatever happened in the past that you can identify and how it impacted you, and why you were disadvantaged or an unlevel playing field, as I mentioned. It has to go through, it's what I call the present effects of past disadvantage. So connect the dots to today as much as you can in each of these experiences, so that the reader understands the story and understands why this is an original impact, if you will, that is still being felt today in some fashion. This is new territory for all of us. And happy to take additional questions. Just as a legal point, the reason, I'm just going to be gratuitous in my legal opinion here. The reason I think race and gender disadvantage is important and should be mentioned. But again, if the certifying agency says not to mention it, don't mention it. But in my opinion, what the government is doing here, among other things, is attempting to approach disadvantage in a race neutral way, which would be the first threshold before a race conscious approach. So race and gender obviously is relevant, along with economic disadvantages.
Okay, we're going to
Okay.
hand it back to Nikki.
Fantastic. All right. So I see that we do have a couple of questions that are in the Q&A that I will read out loud. And just a reminder to everyone that you can use that Q&A function to type in any questions or comments that you have for Dave and Mara, and I'll read them aloud. And to please just keep in mind that all identifying information will be removed if you choose to provide it. Okay, so first off, we have a comment from an attendee. I am a DBE in California and have not heard anything yet from Caltrans for recertification. Has anyone in California heard anything?
I can go since I'm in California. I have not heard anything other from Caltrans other than a notice about the IFR. Hopefully you've received that notice. But in terms of the reevaluation or the recertification process or what they expect from a personal narrative, my firm is certified with the San Francisco MTA. So we've received just recently, just this week from them. So my sense of it is that since they are part of the group of certifying agencies in California, that California agents, certifiers wanted to have a uniform approach, is my understanding that we're probably going to hear something soon from Caltrans.
We met with Caltrans this week.
There you go.
And our understanding is what Mara just said. So it's we don't know what date they're going to be rolling out their recertification processes, but it seems to be soon.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, David and Mara. The next question I have is, any experts in helping prepare the narratives? And there are. I'll let Dave talk about that.
So when we did the testing of the personal narrative process, so we hold ourselves out as experts as much as anybody is. The IFR goes through the topics, and it goes through almost the intensity of the information that's needed. And so when we went through it with the individual business owner, we were the translator between their life story, what they were saying, and putting that, taking their words that they were saying and organizing it in terms of the topic areas and making sure the so what, what's the through line, as Mara mentioned, what's the current effects of the past disadvantage, were mentioned in writing. Importantly, the certifier will take what's on the page. So you have to spell everything out. Even if you think, well, anybody would be able to make this connection, you can't assume that they can, in terms of their process. You need to tell them what the connection is. And some of the people that we were working with showed disadvantage based on limited incomes or limited access to education and employment opportunities as a young adult. Some mentioned the difficulties of being in a rural area, for example. We know other certifying agencies have mentioned to us that they are getting people mentioning a disability or medical issues. Medical issues often came up in the examples that we went through with DBEs. And in each one of those cases, it was important to say, well, how did this manifest itself? Well, I didn't get the opportunities in education that a non-disadvantaged person would get. I didn't get the opportunities once I had my education complete to get the types of employment opportunities that others that were not disadvantaged received, and they were able to, be specific about that. That may have had pay impacts or the ability to be exposed to important experiences that others got that you did not. And then trying to tie each one of those to how that made it harder to start a business, harder to capitalize a business, and then have the connections. Maybe delayed the business startup or made the business startup harder and then made it harder to stay in business. Once you're in business, you may not have the same access to capital as others, and being able to demonstrate, hey, this individual, this business owner who is not socially disadvantaged, got this loan, and they're really no different. Maybe started in business in the same line of work as I did, but because of my social disadvantage, I didn't get the loan, or I was asked for additional collateral, or I didn't get the same terms on the loan. And the effect of that is, whatever the effect is, being able to connect to how your business may be affected. I'm not in the same social networks. I don't get the same leads. I don't get asked to bid on stuff or propose on stuff that maybe others do because of not being in those networks. And then being able to be more specific about that and demonstrate it. So if you seek outside expertise, we would hope that the person that's helping you, based on our experience in this field, is asking you those types of questions. The big thing for us is the blank page problem. And we've been talking to certifiers about this and other public agencies since October 3rd. And it's very hard to just have that blank page, and you can tell a story, but it's a personal story. It's an emotional story. It's not something you typically write down with a blank piece of paper. If you seek expertise, the most important thing that outside advisor can help you with is that blank page problem. They should listen to your story, your own story, not feed you what the story needs to be, but listen to your story and get that on paper. And once it's on paper, it's so much easier. When we were doing this with people, we would show them after our first meeting what that looked like. And that really eased the conversation to say, oh, well, I thought of something else I could add here, or I thought of another type of disadvantage I can add there, or, to kind of beef it up. It might have been 3 pages or 4 pages that we wrote, but it was powerful stuff. And it was emotional to go through these experiences. So when you're seeking help, seek somebody with some emotional intelligence that's going to be respectful of your story and the pain that it may be able, that you may be facing when you go through that. It was personal to us when we were helping firms, and it is, you can't get away from that. It's called personal narrative for a reason, and you can't get around the emotional part of this. And that was true in almost every case. I hope that's helpful. Uh, Mara, I don't know if you have, I'm not sure I completely understood the question, and Mara, fix it if I answered it incorrectly.
No, I think you covered all the points in terms of experts. That this is new. What I tell people, it's been a long time since people, if they went to college, even had to write a personal narrative in applying for college. But it's drawn from this requirement, in my view, is drawn from the Harvard case that was decided by the Supreme Court. I think it's 2023, and where each student submits a personal narrative and explains essentially why the university should, favorably view them as a candidate for admission. It's that same kind of idea, except for those individuals tend to be in their 20s, and here we're talking about people that are have a lot longer lived experience, but that's the idea behind it. So if you kind of wrap your head around that place, it's kind of, I think, a little easier to understand what they're seeing. Without more information, and we have some here, it's hard to tell you. First of all, there's no experts because this is brand new, like I said. But secondly, kind of like the talking points. But there's, if you will, guidelines, and you're hearing about some of them here in terms of what a good narrative should be.
I
Leave
might
no
mention,
stone unturned, I would say. Leave no stone unturned, at least on the first draft.
I want to make one other comment. So, a few years ago, the Transportation Research Board put out a request for proposals for a study that we ended up winning, Keen Independent ended up winning. Um, and they wanted to know what type of supportive services and other assistance were most effective and helpful to DBEs around the country. So part of that was talking to the most successful DBEs, some of that had graduated, people that were making tens of $1 millions a year and really competing much more close to competing on a level playing field with non-DBEs. In each one of those cases, everybody talked about almost going out of business. The times they had to put it was beans for dinner every night because they just were trying to make payroll. They didn't have any extra money to do anything. Calling friends and family for additional funding because they couldn't get loans. Um, so I say that because in one of the things that gets in the way of a personal narrative is pride and not wanting to be a victim or being seen as a victim. You got to get over that for the personal narrative because everybody has been successful. You're in business, you're a DBE. So by some measures of success, we look at survival rates of DBEs as one of in our studies around the country, and survival rates of businesses in general. It's a challenge to stay in business. If you're a DBE or an ACDBE today, you're in some ways automatically successful because you're still in business. So yes, but you could have been more successful, or it was harder than others, and you need to tell the story of how it might have been more difficult and you had to overcome more challenges that non-disadvantaged individuals say. And I can tell you that you're in the same boat as the most successful DBEs and ACDBEs in the country because we've talked with them, we've heard their stories, and it was exactly where you might be today of just trying to stay in business or trying to build your business. They had that moment too. And there's no shame in being able to tell the story of how it's been difficult and how you're facing challenges today. That's what the personal narrative does. And if you don't do that, you won't get recertified. So I hope that comment is helpful. You're in good company if you face challenges, and all the personal narrative process is asking you to put it on paper.
Thank you, David. Mara. One additional comment in the Q&A. Was any research done for the business community at large regarding the opinion on the DBE changes, i.e. companies that were not qualified before but now qualify, or firms that team with DBEs and what they would do with the new rule?
Not part of this DBE survey, but we are actively doing studies right now. We know because we've talked with them that some of the white male-owned small businesses, when we explain what the DBE certification is, will say that they would qualify for it and they might be interested in applying for it. It's not most of the small businesses, it's a small fraction of the small businesses, but we expect more white male-owned firms that may be facing different type of social disadvantage, whether it be disability, whether it be being a rural area, maybe it's a disabled veteran-owned firm, to be applying for certification and successfully certified. We know in some states that those firms are getting certified now. Um, so, uh, so that's for the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, we know that primes are concerned, and maybe these are the good primes, are concerned about keeping a healthy set of potential subconsultants in their states because they can only deliver projects if they have a full team of the general contractor and all the specialty trades subcontractors, and they have concerns about the health of DBEs that they may have been relying on in the past to be able to deliver projects. They're facing workforce challenges around the country. It's hard to get projects done, and they need all parts of the team being healthy and successful. So we have had, maybe it's not directly saying, oh, we're really worried about the effect of this program on DBEs, but we're getting that feel in some of the work that we're doing. And that's not to say that all primes are feeling that way or playing fair with their DBE subconsultants, but some are. And we did an economic impact analysis in a recent study. I'd like to tell you more, but we're just releasing it in the next, hopefully soon. And DBEs contribute a major part of the transportation contracting industry economy. We quantified that, we've demonstrated that. We know that DBE certification substantially increases your likelihood of being in business going forward. It adds to business stability and longevity. We've documented that, has a measurable effect. There's many positive economic effects of the DBE program and DBEs, not only on DBEs, but the whole economy and for prime contractors that are not DBEs. So we hope that this type of information can also be part of the conversation of, hey, it's not just the individual DBE firm that if it goes out of business is hurt. It's the entire industry and it's the local economy. And we've measured those effects. Those effects are real.
Thank you, Dave. We don't have any additional questions in the Q&A. Again, if any other folks have questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. We will maybe wrap a little bit early if we don't have any additional questions. So maybe we should skip to the next steps. There we go. And we'll talk a little bit about what those are. And then if any other questions come through, I can read those. And otherwise, we can adjourn a bit early. But Keen Independent is going to be sending up a follow-up email to all attendees, and that will include a link to this that we post on YouTube. Please feel free to share this with your networks. There are also links there on the side where you can keep up with Keen Independent on our company website and via LinkedIn. And we also do provide support services in drafting those personal narratives to DBEs and ACDBEs. So please get in contact with us for more information about any of those. And with that, it looks like there are no additional questions or comments. So thank you all very much for attending. I will give the last word to Dave and Mara.
I just wanted to say we have a lot of respect for the DBEs and ACDBEs that have been affected and are going through this process. This is not what you signed up for. We empathize with that. We know many on the certifier and the public agency side, share our feelings about this, but they still got to do their job. There is also a feeling of confusion and disarray. We want to urge you to have you have enough information and public agencies have enough information from the IFR to confidently move forward. I also want to mention that there's a political part of this that we didn't put into the webinar, but we need to mention is the reauthorization of the DBE program is up later this year in the transportation bill. Maybe Mark can mention this a bit more. And that's by no means a certain thing. The reauthorization has been, happened regularly with the DBE program for decades, and maybe for the first time that's really in question. So in another forum, you may want to bring up among other DBEs and other small businesses the need to have your voices heard around that reauthorization. So Mara, again, you get the last word.
I just want to thank everyone for attending. I know this is, as Dave said, a very confusing time. I've had colleagues and friends who are certified DBEs, very astute folks who are basically, I'm not understanding this, I'm not sure what to do. So if you're feeling those kinds of uncertainties, you're not alone. I think I agree that the certifiers from the ones that I've spoken to are all acting in good faith, want to act in good faith. They want to be compliant. Obviously, they don't want to risk federal funding, but in some of them, they want to be leaders in this field. So they want to set best practices. So don't be shy about communicating your concerns or your questions with them. My firm and Dave's firm are available for any follow-ups or any questions you might have. And so thank you again.
All right. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.